Okay, good evening, everyone. It's very good to see you all here. My name's Ed Kinane. I'm part of Upstate Drone Action, along with many other folks in this room. Before I introduce our speakers this evening, I do want to mention something very disturbing, which is that we learned that on Monday, U.S. drones massacred 150 Somalis in one attack. So perhaps we could just have a moment of silence in memory of those unknown people. Thank you. I learned about this massacre through an article by Glenn Greenwald. He was the investigative journalist. And he has what I find to be a really pregnant paragraph about, well, first of all, how many of you had heard about this massacre? Okay, pretty much most of us. But I would wager that very few U.S. people have heard about it. And Glenn Greenwald, I just want to read this paragraph to you, which is his analysis of why the killing of 150 people probably won't get too much attention here in the U.S. Due one, the election season obsession with horse race analysis and pressing matters such as the size of Donald Trump's hands. Two, widespread Democratic indifference to the killing of foreigners where there's no partisan advantage to be had against the GOP from pretending to care. Three, the invisibility of places like Somalia and the implicit devaluing of lives there. And lastly, the complete normalization of the model whereby the U.S. president kills whomever he wants, whenever he wants, without regard to any semblance of law, process, accountability, or evidence. Now, back on January 28th, we, a number of us, a dozen of us, were arrested, and there were many other supporters across the road out of Hancock commemorating Jerry Berrigan. Jerry Berrigan, in his 90s, when interviewed by the Syracuse Post-Standard, said, "I would have resisted more often and been arrested more often." So that was just the latest of one of our civil resistance actions out at Hancock. There were about 10 or 11 others before that Jerry Berrigan commemoration, whereby we had 30 life-size cutouts of Jerry blocking the entrance and the exit to Hancock Air Base, drone base. Previous to that was the Big Books action. Several huge books, maybe 8 feet high. Ellen would know about this. 7 feet high, yeah. This is one of Ellen's brainchilds. And we blocked the entrance there as well. And going back, time is too short to go into the list of all our actions. But one action is particularly important, and that is the action that Anne Grady wasn't involved in, but nonetheless has spent 49 days in prison because she took pictures of that action. And then also, Marianne's from Ithaca. I think everyone in the room knows. And everyone knows Marianne. And I think probably most everyone knows Professor Harry Murray from Nazareth College, who tonight will be sentenced by Judge Gideon. Now, Harry was arrested way back in 2013, I believe, and he's only now coming to justice. And then Beth Harris from Ithaca, professor at Ithaca College, retired, is that right? But also a member of Jewish Voices for Peace. And she is going to mention the ACLU initiative to limit the upcoming president's ability to kill at will. So I think with that, and we'll finish up with some Q&A if we have time. So we'll all try to be briefer than I'm being. Okay.
Okay.
Mary Ann, hit it.
All right. Thank you, Ed. And I want to say thank you to the whole community that has been incredibly supportive while I was in jail and beforehand, and from a year and a half ago when I was on trial. And actually, this whole process has taken about 3 years now, since Ellen and some of the Catholic workers were involved with the Ash Wednesday action. And I just want to show you pictures. These are two of the pictures that I took from the roadway. As a matter of fact, you could see this white line where you pull your car up to a stop sign or to an intersection to show you that I was out in the roadway taking the photos. Anyway, we later learned that my conviction was based on the fact that the base property line goes out to the double yellow line in the middle of the road. My attorney, Lance Salisbury, has taken this, or helped put forth an appeal to the highest court in New York State, the New York State Court of Appeals. So I'm out on bail right now for $5,000. And the reason that I came out was because our mother, Teresa Grady, is in her final days. And so this enables me to be with her, with my siblings. And so I'm very grateful for that. And I do want to say that I would have, if Mom was not in this position, I would have been with the women in Pod 4 at Jamesville. And I want to give a shout out to those women who were incredibly supportive also, and had some really good, poignant questions themselves of the drone pilots, and wanted to know about the victims. And so they actually met, or one of the women had gone down to the Justice Center for a court date, and she met some of the folks that were arrested with Ed during the Jerry Berrigan action, or right after the Jerry Berrigan action, when they were in the holding cell waiting to be processed. So the women had a direct connection there, and they saw the 12 folks being left on the curb, handcuffed, waiting to be taken away in cars. They saw that on the news. So I wanted to just share with you very briefly a statement from my attorney as to the major point of my appeal. And that reads, Lance Salisbury writes, he says, there exists a split within the decisions of the Onondaga County courts on the validity of the orders of protection at issue in this case, and that the Court of Appeals must resolve this difference. Salisbury argues that the New York Criminal Code requires that orders of protection be issued only on behalf of a crime victim or a witness, and not for protection of property, including a military base, which has happened in my case. So I wanted to just say that this whole issue of the orders of protection has been, as you all know, the tool that they're using now to silence the issue of our having the First Amendment right to be at the roadway, to be at the base, and demand that our government redress our grievances, which specifically speaks to ending the drone program. And I think everyone in this room understands the crimes that are being committed. If I may just read a couple here. They include the violation of sovereignty laws. Sovereignty laws, for example, we are invading Pakistan with drones. We're not at war with Pakistan. As in the case of this Monday's drone attack in Somalia, we're not at war with Somalia. Monday is the night I got out and I learned the news of this horrific attack. We also violate the due process rights of people on the ground in these different countries. And we also know that, and we also know that there are many, many innocent people being killed. They're being killed in terms of the double tap that's used as one of the process where the drone pilots hover the drones over the site where initial initial attack is done, and then they come back within 10 minutes and hit the first responders. I just want to say that we understand that many Americans are very concerned with our soldiers that would be put at risk if they're sent out to war in other battlefields. What we contend, we who are a part of this drone resistance here, is that our pilots who are sitting in the salons in Hancock Air Base are also put at risk. And we know that now because of the exceptional witness by the whistleblowers, the 4 drone pilots, or drone operators, I should say, that have come forward and described, after 6 years of duty, the horrific pain that they carry after the dehumanizing behavior of killing the other, and the dehumanizing process of how that all takes place within the package of the program. So we say we're doing it for our soldiers, our service people as well. And we actually call for people right here at Hancock to come out and stop driving the drones and stop putting yourself at risk, and that you have a right to be a conscientious objector. And we have ads that are going into television and radio stations around the upstate New York areas where there are the drone bases, also giving that same message. And we also ask that people who are going into Lockheed Martin, that is very much involved with the building and construction of drones right here in this area, we ask people to leave those types of employment and seek other employment. Employment that we know is not as available because of all the money that's being poured into the military and not into the human resources that are needed. And I feel that I was with the people that are at the end of the highway robbery, the poor. I was in the jail with the poor because these people have lack of services and schooling and drug programs and trauma clinics. All the things, the human needs, are not being met here on the ground. So just basically, I want to finish with the words of the drone pilots. There's 2 paragraphs here. The drone pilots wrote a letter to President Obama, to Secretary Ashton Carter, and CIA Director John Brennan. It reads, we are former Air Force service members. We joined the Air Force to protect American lives and protect our Constitution. And we came to the realization that the innocent civilians we were killing only fueled the feelings of hatred that ignited terrorism and groups like ISIS, while also serving as a fundamental recruitment tool similar to Guantanamo Bay. This administration and its predecessors have built a drone program that is one of the most devastating driving forces for terrorism and destabilization around the world. And when the guilt of our roles in facilitating this systemic loss of life, innocent life, became too much, all of us succumbed to PTSD. We were cut loose by the same government we gave so much to, and then sent out into the world without adequate medical care, reliable public health services, or necessary benefits. And some of us are now homeless. Others of us barely make it. For these young men and for all of the people who are in this quagmire of the killing drone program, this is why we go to Hancock Air Base, and for the people who are the victims. And I hold the children's pictures up here, and we hold the grandmother's photo here, and all of the photos that are behind us. We do these actions for these victims, and we know that the truth is not being told. So, Beth, I hand the baton to you.
Okay, so why are we having these drone wars and all of these victims? This is policy of targeted assassination through drone attacks has become an important strategy for maintaining and expanding U.S. empire. And there is a shroud of secrecy, which is based on claims of executive privilege and national security, that is central to this whole U.S. drone warfare. As Marianne mentioned, this grotesque use of orders of protection against nonviolent protesters is intended to silence opposition to the drone warfare and silence the witnessing to the victims of drone attacks. In Marianne's case, her act of taking photos of drone protesters from the road in front of the base was considered such a serious crime by Judge Gideon that he initially sentenced her to a year in prison. As we all know, secrecy about the government's kill policies is the perfect foundation for impunity. There is a complete lack of accountability as we hear about the 150 that were just killed. Nobody knows who they are, and nobody will be held responsible. This kind of mass murder threatens the very fabric of our own society, as well as the society of the victims. And the secrecy also elevates the importance of the kinds of witness that are happening at Hancock and the whistleblowers, because there's no other way to get the truth out. We have to bring the attention of the consequences of this drone warfare to the American people. We have to let the military know that we are watching, and we also have to let our politicians know that they are not defending our interests with these massacres. On Tuesday, the New York Times published an op-ed piece just this week calling for President Obama, to bring his drone warfare policy, quotes, out of the shadows, to constrain the power that he had unleashed before a new president takes power. This article was written by two ACLU lawyers who have been suing the government to release information about drone policies. When Obama has been serving as president, U.S. strikes have killed as many as 5,000 people. Some say 6, some say 9. They say that at least 1,000 have been civilians, but we don't know because they do not release the information that we need to actually know the extent of the impact. We do know that the president has approved strikes in places, as Marianne said, that aren't even in combat zones, and that he authorizes the CIA to carry out signature strikes, which are aimed at people who we don't even know who they are. They've just been identified as being involved in activities that suggest militancy. Is this a reason to kill? And then who knows how drone warfare may be expanded during the next presidency? What will be the scale of policy, of violence that we're facing? Trump claims he's ready to fight and kill whoever in other countries are getting in the way of our rights to their oil. Clinton has supported and helped to develop Obama's drone policies. Sanders supports drone warfare as well. He says used in a selective way. But this is exactly what Obama said as well in his political rhetoric. We don't hear anything about how the government can be held accountable. At times, the Obama administration selectively releases information to the public about the drones policy. But at the same time, they fight back against FOIA requests that the ACLU and other organizations have made, trying to get information about the policies. And the ACLU is now calling for the release of the following information and that this kind of information be required to be available for all presidencies. One is there actually is a presidential policy guidance document, and it has provided the legal and administrative framework for the drone campaign since 2013. The government has agreed to release sections, but who knows if those sections will actually provide the information we need to know as citizens to influence our country's policies. Also, they're calling for legal memos that justify drone strikes that are outside of war zones. And finally, they're looking for information about individual strikes. When did they happen? Where did they happen? What were the numbers of civilians who were killed? If civilians were killed, that needs to be investigated. Why did it happen? What kind of compensation was made? All of this information is necessary. And I would just conclude that we must be alarmed when shooting photos of protesters has become a criminal offense, while the drone killings, a mass murder of 150 people, is hidden from public view by our government and the courts.
And now, thank you, Beth. Thank you. And Harry,
Okay.
we are so grateful for your witness, and
Well, it's pretty minor compared to most of the folks in this room. But I just wanted to say briefly that a few days prior to my trial on January 27th, Judge Gideon signed a subpoena, which I requested, to bring Colonel Greg Zemel, the commander of Hancock Air National Guard Base, to my trial, to bring documentation answering a series of questions, a series of points about the operation of drones piloted out of Hancock. Instead of Colonel Zemel, the staff judge advocate of the base, Lieutenant Colonel Laurie, appeared just before the trial to argue a motion to quash that subpoena. In part, he said, the subpoena has 9 numbered items that it requests. Items 3 through 9 request a variety of information regarding military operations that have been and are now being conducted by the 174 Attack Wing. Okay. Release of such information, even if the answer to any particular request may be none, is a violation of federal law and could subject Colonel Zemel or any person to criminal prosecution. Additionally, the release authority for such information, upon information and belief, is most likely the Secretary of Defense or some similar senior Department of Defense official. Colonel Zemel does not have the authority to release such information. In court, Lieutenant Colonel Laurie suggested that I might want to subpoena either the Secretary of Defense or the President, which could raise an interesting scenario come next January. Anyway, item number 8, which he said was confidential information, was the number of children under the age of 18 killed by MQ Reaper drones piloted from Hancock Air National Guard Base by country and calendar year from January 1st, 2009 through today. I wasn't quick enough to think about the import of that. The number of children killed by drones piloted out of Hancock is classified information, something which would be a threat to our national security if the American people knew it. What does that say about our country? What does it say about the notion of democracy if if vital to the security of our country is the knowledge, is to keep secret the knowledge of how many children it has killed. And that's all I have to say.
Wow. And now we join you, Harry, and tell us what you're facing for the public.
Oh, me? I'm facing a maximum of 15 days I was convicted on a simple trespass charge. The other 3 charges against me, including the misdemeanor obstruction of governmental administration, which carries a year, and 2 disorderly conducts, were dropped a few days before the trial. The disorderly conduct was probably dropped because that meant that I didn't have the right to a jury trial, but it may have been a coincidence that it was dropped within 24 hours after Judge Gideon signed the subpoena. Probably just a coincidence.
Perhaps other folks in the room might have a question for one of our panelists. Beth, Harry, Marianne.
And I have a question.
Ray?
Harry, will you be subject to an order of protection?
That remains to be seen. As far as I know, my initial order of protection ran out at the end of 2 years. It was only renewed once, but I never had the courage to test that. We'll have to see what Judge Gideon chooses to do with regards to that. Well, I've been involved with St. Joseph's House of Hospitality, which is the oldest Catholic worker house in the universe. Unless there's another planet where it started. And all I do is I organize the Saturday meal and give the regular workers the day off, and I bring in different, mostly church groups, to prepare and serve the meal. And I've been doing that for about 26 years now.
Wow. Just 26. Huh?
Just 26, well,
In other
I'm new
words,
to it.
So your kids grew up in the Catholic worker movement. Yeah.
At least on the outskirts of it, yes.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, we're grateful for your witness, and that we're grateful also to be able to join you in the courtroom. And we have to get in there in the next 15 minutes.
Okay,
So,
well, and
do
I'm
you
grateful
have
to
any-
all of you.
I have just a question. How many people, who here has been arrested at the base? So I just want to thank everyone here for your witness, and just to let people know what a powerful, committed community that this is, and how determined we are to stand with each other as well.
That's right. Yes, whether it's Jack Gilroy, who served the 3 months in the Jamesville Penitentiary, as he calls it. It's not a correctional institution. I could testify to that. And now, Harry, tell us what you're hoping for tonight.
That's very.
I'm hoping for metanoia, for conversion.
Oh, tell us what you're going to ask the judge, in case the cameras can't join us. Just in case.
Well, I've asked the judge to make a statement about drones in response to the conversation that we've all been having over the last 5 years, and gave him a number of examples of judges over the years who have made some pretty courageous decisions and kind of invoked a higher notion of justice in making their decisions about civil disobedience cases with respect to war and peace.
And Gideon has liked you in the past, and
He likes you.
Yes.
He likes you.
so maybe he will
As a
listen to
contract.
these, and maybe you may be the key that turns the
Well-
lock of Gideon's heart.
Well, I think that key exists somewhere, and it's probably somewhere in this room.
Yeah.
Probably not here.
No, well, don't say that. You never know. Oh, well, we're glad to be here with you,
Well,
Harry.
and I'm glad that you could be here.
Me too.
That was a very pleasant surprise.
It was for me too. I didn't even know for a couple of days. Okay.
So, Mary Ann, can you just say a few words about your experience in Jamesville?
Oh, boy. Well, I must say that poor people go through the ringer, and we privileged white people don't have a clue. And so it's really important that we be in the jail to be a part of that suffering and make it known to the world. Just as the Black Lives Matter movement is happening on the ground in cities now, thank God for the witness of the young people in the African American communities across the country. We need to, bring the stories out, bring them to the light, and there are many courageous young women that are facing a lot of hardship, facing traumas, facing, trying to make choices of not getting caught up in the drug trade, but part of that has to do with having to coat the pain of having lived through trauma or lived through severe poverty, and my hat goes off to them, and it's pretty horrendous, the kind of life that people are put through at the arbitrary decision of judges from this county. And I was amazed. I had a young woman who was my bunkie. I found out I was bunkable. Everybody said, "What's?" I said, "What's that?" "Oh, you don't want to know." Anyway, this young woman just was trying to just put her head down from October until April in that place. 2 kids are at home with her mom, and she's waiting and just reading book after book after book, trying to keep her head down and not get involved with little scuffles with the guards or with other people. But what a hard existence, not having commissary money, not having money to call home to find out how the kids are or how mom is, that's just one of the many stories. So I think because we have to be in the court in 10 minutes, I'll leave it there, and maybe we'll do a jail sharing. I know Jack and I shared some notes, and I shared with Harry this,
She gave me an
yesterday.
instruction manual, orally.
Anyway, so thanks for all the support, really, it was tremendous. Okay.
This is the case of the People versus Harry W. Murray. Record should reflect that there were media requests, which I am now filing with the court in the court file, from Mr. Bowman and also Mr. Vogt. And I've asked Mr. Murray and his backup counsel this evening, Mr. Kerrigan, as well as Assistant District Attorney Jordan McNamara, if there's any objection. There being no objection, the court will allow it. Cameras are now set up. Record should reflect that following a non-jury trial on January 27, 2016, this court found Mr. Murray guilty of trespass in violation of Penal Law Section 140.05, and sentence was put over to this evening. Mr. Murray, is there any legal reason why sentence cannot be imposed this evening?
No, Your Honor.
And I would ask you, if you want to consult with your attorney, please do so. Just let me know when you want to do that.
Okay.
Your backup counsel, Mr. Kerrigan. People move sentence.
So moved, Your Honor.
People wish to be heard.
Judge, briefly, the defendant was found guilty after a non-jury trial in front of Your Honor. The evidence was pretty clear and right in front of us about what happened. And I think that Mr. Murray needs to take responsibility for it. And I think he deserves 15 days in jail. I mean, this has gone on long enough. Everyone knows the rules up there, and there's continued and ongoing refusal to comply with them. And Mr. Murray very well knew what he did was wrong when he did it. And I think he needs to take some responsibility for it. So I'd request that you sentence him to 15 days, and as well as an order of protection for Commander of the base.
Okay, Mr. Murray, do you wish to be heard?
Yes, Your Honor. Okay. If I may, in my sentencing memo, I outlined an understanding of civil disobedience and how it works. Apologies to my comrades who I know prefer civil resistance. I also argued that judges in a variety of ways can play what you might call an affirmative role in civil disobedience. And I asked you to make a statement about the drones. Mercifully, I won't read that memo, but I'd like to briefly address some complementary issues. One thing is that when I wrote the memo, I neglected the fact that you have addressed the drones at least somewhat. On February 7th, 2014, you told the Hancock 17, "War is evil. It leads to senseless killing and destruction. Whether it's the pilot in a plane several thousand feet in the air dropping a bomb, the missile operator on a ship or a submarine pushing a button, or a drone operator several thousand miles away on a joystick or pushing a button, there's no difference. There's going to be death and destruction. Often it will involve innocent civilians and children. It's a cold fact of war. No reasonable person, in my mind, would ever wish for war. Unfortunately, there are those in this world that are either power hungry or tyrannical, and they must be stood up to, lest we all become lambs led to the slaughter." I can agree with much of your statement until we get to "they must be stood up to" and the apparent implication that war is a legitimate way to stand up to someone. As you know, for me and for many of my friends, the gospel precludes war. Admittedly, the vast majority of Christians do not agree, and we know that shortly after Constantine proclaimed Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire, the church, through Ambrose and Augustine, adopted the just war theory from Cicero and the Roman Officialis priesthood. Since Hugo Grotius, international law tradition has adopted the just war principles. And this tradition says that standing up to tyrants is not a carte blanche. Just as you have argued that there are limits to free speech, so there are limits to the extent to which wars can be just and as to which weapons and techniques are allowable. Chemical and biological weapons have been outlawed by international law. So have landmines, although this ban was, to our shame, adopted without U.S. participation. Henry David Thoreau conveyed the deadly seriousness of these limits to war when he wrote of slavery and of the Mexican-American War, quote, "This people must cease to hold slaves and to make war on Mexico, though it cost them their existence as a people. In short, we may not, in the interest of ensuring that we do not become lambs led to slaughter, become ourselves the wolves who slaughter other lambs, not even if we blithely call it collateral damage." Gandhi and Rawls agree that civil disobedience should be invoked only for issues of life and death, even supreme importance. I believe that weaponized drones constitute such an issue. I must admit, when I first learned about drones, I was skeptical about that. Most of my previous civil disobedience has been over the issue of the nuclear arms race. And that clearly is an issue of supreme importance, with one bomb capable of killing millions of people and, a full-scale nuclear war capable of eliminating the human race, or at least everyone who lives on the northern hemisphere. Drones, on the other hand, kill 3 or 4, 30 or 40, or even 100 persons at a time. You add them up all together and they wouldn't begin to approach the disaster of a single nuclear weapon, and yet there's a harsh symmetry here. Nuclear weapons, as I said in my Travato lecture, are the ultimate modern weapon, mass destruction for a mass society. Drones, on the other hand, are the ultimate postmodern weapon, not weapons of mass destruction, not a master narrative, to use some of their bizarre language, but a technology that really obliterates space and time, allowing someone sitting at Hancock Air Base to kill someone half a planet away in real time. Drones also obliterate the very crucial line between war and peace, turning the whole planet into a permanent war zone, subjecting children to perpetual terror from the buzz of deadly drones overhead. The cheapness of drone strikes, in terms of both money and political risk, makes it more likely that a president will use them, thus increasing the likelihood of an incident that leads to a, quote, real war. Drones, far from being an effective way of standing up to dictators and terrorists, have terrorized much of the world and have made the Middle East and Africa more dangerous places. Even in the period since you addressed the Hancock 17, the Middle East has become engulfed in what could reasonably be called a regional war. U.S. drone strikes have fostered civil war in Yemen and Libya, have left Iraq and Afghanistan in endless cycles of war, have contributed to the rise of ISIS. Jeremy Scahill in Dirty Wars documented how the U.S. policy of drone strikes, special ops, and alliance with warlords transformed al-Shabaab from an unimportant group into a regional terrorist organization. 5 of the top 7 countries from which refugees have come to Europe in the past year have experienced U.S. drone strikes over the past decade. Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Pakistan, Somalia. Drones were certainly not the only cause, but I submit that they contributed to the destruction that's led to that massive exodus. Other nations, most notably Saudi Arabia in Yemen and Russia in Syria, have adopted the U.S. policy of bombing other countries with no declaration of war, laying the foundations for a true regional war. Drones have been part of a policy that have made the region and the world a more dangerous place. All of this is directly relevant to the town of DeWitt. Despite the federal government's policy, spoken of by Lieutenant Colonel Laurie in this courtroom, that the number of children killed by drones flown out of Hancock is classified information, not available to the public in this democracy, there is good reason to believe that homicides are being committed in Onondaga County. The bodies are not here, but the triggers which launch the Hellfire missiles, which obliterate those bodies, are right inside Hancock Air National Guard Base. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, to everybody, I want to apologize for the last minute unavailability yesterday, and I thank you for your willingness to accommodate the court putting this on for this evening. I know it's been a difficult evening, long evening, because I had other matters on. Firstly, I want to thank you for the well-written and informative sentencing memorandum that you submitted. I did find it helpful in arriving at a sentencing decision for this evening. The conflict that still remains in my own mind regarding the limits of civil disobedience really relates more to the philosophies of John Rawls, which in my mind mirrors the definition of civil disobedience which was expounded by Thoreau. They're quite similar. The basic premise, as I understand it, is that the individual must judge for themselves whether a law is just. To be acknowledged, a law to be acknowledged and complied with, and that causes me great concern. Particularly as we are all seeing today daily throughout the world, there's no homogeneous belief among peoples as to what is just. I'm sure that a terrorist feels justified in their horrific and violent actions towards jihad, going against common laws which are established for people to exist by. You and I certainly would agree that a limit exists between nonviolent and violent actions, but is not the terrorist justified in their own mind to break the established law? I don't agree with it, but in their own mind they may feel justified. In my mind, it goes back to what Locke and Rousseau always said, that the natural state of the individual rule and decision must give way to some extent for the betterment of all mankind, lest there simply be anarchy and chaos. So there has to be some common set of rules for the good of everybody. The question in my mind remains, what are the limits, and by whose standards do those limits exist? This court believes, and you may disagree, that I've always attempted to remain fair and accommodating to your position and those of your fellow co-defendants. But quite frankly, there's been very little reciprocation or willingness to understand the position of the court or to enter into any compromise situation or any middle ground. At times I felt personally the attitude of the group to be that they are right and everyone who does not agree with their position is wrong in their view. Our form of government encourages divergent views as a means of arriving at well-reasoned decisions or changes. In my opinion, the group as a whole is unwilling to even acknowledge any divergent position. It is their way or no way. That to me is not democracy, it's dictatorship. Now I know that I will be criticized by your group for my comments today, but you asked me in the sentencing memorandum to make my thoughts known, and you asked me specifically to do that, and that's what I'm doing. I truly believe that the first trial, the so-called Hancock 38, was fruitful. I observed discussions and discourse occurring within the community at large concerning the issue of the use of drones. That's what the objective was, to get that issue out in the public. As these trials have continued to multiply, I observed something else. I observed the discussion to be less about the issues of the drone usage and more about the protests themselves and the resulting trials. In fact, during one of the prior jury trials, I was personally shocked, and I said so during the challenge conference in Chambers to that particular defendant and backup counsel, that the jury response to the defendant's question about their feelings about targeted foreign killings through the use of drones, he received the response after the poignant silence and the stares of all on the jurors' faces, such as a herd of deer getting caught in the headlights. One of the jurors raised their hand and said, "I do not know what you are talking about." And that shocked me. Clearly, in my opinion, the current actions are not resulting in the conveyance of the information about what the cause you're trying to portray. I know in your sentencing memorandum, I know that you cite the proposition that it is not the effectiveness of your actions that matter, but to me, I believe that the actions have become the cause and not the very important discussion that should be occurring in the general public. And to me, that's truly a shame. The discussion should be about the drones in the general public and not about these trials. Personally, I don't know how I feel about the use of the drones in the current configuration. I have had the same issue you had initially. I see the arguments on both sides. I'm conflicted. The drones are a tool of war. And like any other tool of war, as you've indicated, I've said previously, I don't think there's any reasonable person that would ever disagree that peace is preferable to war. I hope there's nobody out there that would think otherwise. But unfortunately, people do exist in the world that do not share in that belief for whatever reason. And again, I firmly believe that there has to be some protection at some level, lest we be lambs to the slaughter. But in fact, my personal beliefs do not matter in the context of the current case. This is a case of trespass, the improper and unlawful remaining on property without permission. I've said it before that I don't want to curtail your rights to protest and get the issue out there. But it's an issue of, I still don't understand why the protest at one designated area, which is next to the road, which obviously some people are seeing as they're going by, why there has to be a blocking of the roadway. I just don't see the differentiation. While I understand, you know, and we've joked about this, about what you told your students. While I understand that your students may be unhappy with my decision, my sentencing decision today, as you apparently had promised them A's if you went to jail, I'm not going to jail you for expressing your opinions and convictions. I am going to sentence you in relationship to what I believe is the unlawful action of the trespass, blocking that at the roadway area. If jail is to result, it's going to be from you. You deciding to be discourteous to the authority of this court by willfully deciding to disobey and purposely choosing to violate the sentence and order of this court. To me, that's a different level. I take that personally. It's an order of the court. I expect there to be some acknowledgement that you're going to abide by it. Again, in my mind, there is a difference in the sentencing considerations upon a willful defiance to the authority of this court. In other words, a contemptuous behavior on the part of the actor showing a lack of respect to the authority of the court. To this point, such is not the case in the immediate matter. Mr. Murray, in my opinion, you have been courteous and respectful to this court and the judicial process. I firmly believe that, and I have personally enjoyed the sharing of beliefs when you were testifying and answering the questions I had raised. Therefore, it is the judgment of this court that I'm going to sentence you to a 1-year conditional discharge on the following terms and conditions: that you do not violate any federal, state, or local municipal laws, that there be no subsequent arrests and or convictions, and that you notify this court within 24 hours if you are arrested and or convicted of any such laws, that you appear in this court as directed by this court should there be a violation, that I am imposing a $250 fine and a $125 surcharge for a total of $375, and I'll hear from you relative to payment of that. I am putting in a specific condition that you may only participate in organized activities upon the premises of the 174th Attack Wing at 6001 East Malloy Road in the town of DeWitt, County of Onondaga, and State of New York, pursuant to the terms, conditions, and restrictions and area delineations specified in a valid permit issued by the town of DeWitt and or as permitted by agreement with the 174th Attack Wing at Hancock for such activities, and under the specific conditions that you do not restrict in any manner access to, from, in other words, ingress, egress, any of the entranceways to the 174th Attack Wing at Hancock. Additionally, initially, I am going to put the order of protection in. I don't know how much you're going in and out of the country. Do you go out of the country quite frequently?
Well, Your Honor, my long-suffering wife has spent 3 years worrying about us even taking a trip to Canada, so we have really foregone that for several years already, largely because we don't want to leave her stranded, or if I'm held for hours or something like that. So I would appreciate it if you could make it a condition of the conditional discharge as opposed to an order of protection.
I guess the difference in my mind is there's a very different penalty if you violate the order of protection versus the conditional discharge. I'm wondering if I modify the order to the effect that he stays away from the place of employment, if that matters to TSA. I don't know.
I think if it's going to, my understanding is, and I'm not an expert, is that if it's going
I
to
am not
appear in
either.
the computer system, only the fact of the
Yeah, but
of
the
order
computer
appears, not a
system
lot of
shows the
detail.
conditions. Mr.
Yeah.
Kerrigan, are you aware of?
The only information I have is that the TSA computer goes off and establishes a red flag, if you will, my words, in the event there's any order of protection. What happens during the next hours as they investigate or get copies faxed or whatever's on the computer, I don't know.
Because the computers usually show all the terms and conditions.
I think initially what the computer shows is the existence of an order of protection rather than reading the fine print. And whether or not the agent at the border has the opportunity to read the fine print rather than seeing a computer notification that there is an OOP, which sets off alarms in his mind. And considering their work with justification in most cases, I don't know where one starts and stops reading.
No, you're not a party to this. You're not a party. If you want to go over there, it's up to you, but she's not a member, but
If the court
he's
would be
pro
kind
se.
enough, I'd be happy to. Thank you.
Well, we're pro se at this point, so.
Judge, there's a decision, a very consensual, voluntary decision was made on behalf of the defendant. And he subjected himself to penalties because of his actions. And he did it knowingly, intentionally, and purposefully. So that is what he subjected himself to by committing this crime. And I understand your position in regards to how you feel about Mr. Murray, despite the fact that he's a professor at the rival of my alma mater. But he did purposefully subject himself to these laws. So, and to the jurisdiction of this court to set this order of protection.
I mean, here's the reality of it. If there's an order of protection, the maximum it can be is 2 years. I've got him under the 1 year on the conditional discharge. My feeling is if you violated in this conditional discharge in the first year, I am going to put that order of protection in. So I'm willing to give you, in other words, you've got the terms here in the conditional discharge. If you violate it, then I'll have a declaration of delinquency filed we'll have a resentence, and I will include an order of protection. So it's going to be your decision if that happens in the first year. So, I mean, I'll leave the order of protection out with that caveat that if you violate this, realize what's going to happen.
Yes.
Judge, I just want to note that the day after Mr. Murray's trial, there was about a dozen people arrested out there. So
But I don't believe he was.
he was not. I'm just giving you notice.
Well, I'm gonna leave the order of protection out, but with that caveat. If that happens, it's a violation of the order of the conditional discharge, and I will put it in.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I am gonna leave in a condition that says abide by all orders of protection now or hereafter issued. So there's nothing out there from what you're telling me right now, right?
Right.
All the other ones, is the other one expired?
I believe, yeah, it expired 2 years. There was 1 year renewal, and then there was no renewal.
Can you check the
after this.
registry? When can you pay the surcharge, the fine and surcharge by?
Well, Your Honor, you know, it's always been against my principles to pay fines, but I think in light of I'm thinking in light of our dialogue, that I'd like to, since you are reaching out with a sort of a compromise, that I should act in that spirit. One possibility I'd like to suggest would be for me to pay the surcharge, but to make a donation in the amount of the fine to a group like the Afghan Peace Volunteers. Might that be acceptable to you?
Honestly, I think there's got to be a penalty here, and you know, there's got to be an offset here somewhere, so I'm going to impose the fine and surcharge. Surcharge I can't do anything about. That goes
Right.
off to the state. All but I think $5 stays with the municipality, although I might be wrong on that. It's a negligible amount.
Okay, well, I think then, in the interest of the spirit of compromise that you just talked about, let's see, could I have a couple of weeks to pay?
Sure. March, let me put it on for, I'm going to put April 4th, or April 5th, how's that?
That would be fine.
I'm going to have you go over these terms and conditions with your backup counsel, and if you don't understand anything, just,
Thank you, Your Honor. Shall we look at them back there whilst you move on with other cases?
I don't have any other cases.
We're trying to end it tonight. Let me know if there are any questions.
Okay.
Can I reach for a pen?
Oh, sure.
Today's the 10th.
There is none in effect now.
Nothing's in effect. All right, the registry is showing nothing on New York State in effect.
Okay.
But remember that conditional discharge has that term in there.
You can get another shot, man. You'll hear about that. We'll have a copy of that in a moment.
Okay, I think I
Okay, and do you have any questions on that, or?
think so.
Okay. I'm going to order this, and it's filed and entered as of this date. Can I have copies made and then seals put on?
Your pen?
You do have a right to appeal the sentence, and I gotta have everybody hold it down. You do have a right to appeal the order and decision of this court. If you wish to appeal this decision, order or decision of the court, a decision and judgment of the court, rather, you have to file a notice of appeal and duplicate with the clerk's office here within 30 days. If you need a notice of appeal, there's forms available online, or we can supply you with one. Any
I have
questions?
one with me, but I don't anticipate filing.
I don't think there's a need. Well, Your Honor, I just want to say I appreciate your continuing the dialogue and telling me honestly what you think. And at some point, hopefully, we'll continue the dialogue.
Well, it tends to be the one time that a judge can express what they feel, so.
Maybe more than that.
All right. Do you need a copy?
Be helpful if there is, if there's one made.
Record should reflect him giving Mr. Murray a copy of the written orders and conditions of the conditional discharge, providing Mr. McNamara a copy of the same. But I really meant it. I think there's got to be a reemphasis to another direction, because it's, if you want the dialogue, it's not occurring.
I know we need.
There's a copy from
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Berrigan.
Sure.
Good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We stand adjourned.